My name is Aubrey, and I am Miami Church.
Mi nombre es George Santana.
I am Ajay Williams.
Mi nombre es María.
I'm Paul.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Allegra.
Mi nombre es Mark Herrera.
My name is Haley, and I am Miami Church.
Et je suis Miami Church.
I'm Will, and I'm Miami Church.
Nama saya Carmen. Saya adalah Miami Church.
My name is Kevin Sparrow, and I am Miami Church.
Je m'appelle Arnaud et je suis Miami Church.
I'm Carolina and I'm Miami Church.
Meu nome é Hudson e eu sou Miami Church.
My name is Crystal Guico, and I am Miami Church.
Yo soy Miami Church.
We are Miami Church.
And I am Miami Church.
And I am Miami Church.
And I am Miami Church.
Now, hey, good to see you guys this morning. My name's Greg, if I don't know you, pastor here at Miami Church. And we're in part 3 of a message series that we're calling All In. You can see it right there. And today, I want to talk to you about something that's so counterintuitive that I actually don't think you would believe it unless you've experienced. Like, it's so counterintuitive, and it relates to you. It relates to your happiness. It relates to your joy, to your sense of accomplishment, to your sense of success. And again, for those of us who've experienced this, today's a reminder. It emphasizes or re-emphasizes something that we've discovered as it relates to happiness and the idea of being full and being content. And so I just give you the bottom line of the message up front so you know where we're headed. And here it is. You'll see it on the screen. As long as you are all about you, you won't be happy. As long as you are only about you. If it's only about you, no matter what you have, no matter how much money you have or how much money you make, no matter what you accomplish or no matter what kind of success you have, you cannot, I'll go that strong. It's not will not, it's you cannot be happy. There's a principle, the way I would say is this: you cannot fulfill you. You cannot fulfill you. On this next slide, you cannot fulfill you. You need more than you have to offer. In fact, if you were able to magically, on a computer somehow, get you exactly how you wanted you, you could get yourself the right size and the right income and the right job and the right kids and the right spouse and the right clothes. If you could get you exactly like you wanted you, you still would not be happy. You still are not enough. And this is kind of counterintuitive, right? Because I just naturally think, and you naturally think, something like this. It's on the screen, right? If I could just get certain things, or if I could just have certain things, or if I could live a certain way, or have a certain health, or have a certain look, or have a certain whatever, then I'd just be set. I would just be good. I would be happy and content, and life would just be great. But here's the truth, and I think we know this at some level, deep down. But here's a reminder. You cannot acquire, consume, or even exercise your way to happiness. It's impossible. You can't acquire, consume, or exercise your way to joy or contentedness or fullness. Now, just to make sure we're kind of on the same page with this conversation, I want you to think about, what do we do? I do this, so I'm guilty. I'm not casting judgment. What do we do when it comes to the idea of acquiring or consuming or looking a certain way? We look at other people, right? We look around us, people we work with, go to school with, people in our neighborhood or people around us, and we look at other people and we look at what they acquire and we look at what they consume, and not just food or anything, but stuff. And we look at how they look, right? And we look at them and we tell ourselves, if I could have that, or if I could look like that, or if I could drive that, then somehow I would just be set. Life would be great, and I'd be happy, I'd be content, and life would be just amazing. You know what we do? Have you ever heard of something called a composite person? Does anyone know what a composite person is? A composite person is a made-up person, right? And this is kind of how it works. Again, I'll do this, right? Is we look at not just one person, but at multiple people, and we kind of look well, if I could have their house, and if I could drive their car, and if I could have his biceps, and I could have that person's six-pack, and if I could, work at that job, and if my kids went to that school, and we look at about 12 different people, right? and we combine them into a composite person. We look at their highlights. We take the highlights of their life and we make a composite person. And then what happens? All of a sudden, I don't feel so good about myself anymore, and I'm not happy. And I'm not looking at like one individual, because there's no one individual that I would just trade everything with, like everything I've got for everything else. But we look at the highlights, the highlights of people, and we pick and choose from their lives. And I wish I had this, and I wish I had that, and I wish I had that. Have you ever done that? Yeah, you don't want to admit that here, but I have, right? And what happens is, without meaning to, we become a little bit too focused. Sometimes people would say hyper-focused. We become a little bit too hyper-focused on becoming something that we're not. And I'm all about self-improvement and reading and health and discipline and exercise. But what happens is when you become consumed with you, no matter how much progress you make, you become or you continue to be unhappy. And you continue to be not content, because you can't acquire, consume, or even exercise your way to happiness. Now, here's the thing, and you may have a hard time believing this, but I'm telling you, this is unbelievable. You may not be able to acquire, consume, or exercise your way to happiness, but you can serve and volunteer your way there. Do you believe that? Now, if you don't believe me, don't do it right now. Later this afternoon, go to Google and Google, is there a connection between happiness and health and serving? Is there a connection between happiness and health and selflessness? And you're going to discover, when you Google this, that there's research project after research project after research project that confirms that there's a connection between happiness and selflessness. There's a connection between health and contentedness and joy and the idea of volunteering. There's actually a connection here. Now, I don't have time to go through all the research, but I'll just highlight a couple of these because they're interesting. There's one research that was done by the University of Chicago, and they just basically asked the question, like, what career, like what job are people most happy? They're most content. Like they're fulfilled. This is a fulfilling career. And here's the list. You'll see it on the screen. These were the careers that were the most fulfilling, the most satisfying. Caring for others, jobs that you were caring for others. Teaching others, jobs where you were instructing and teaching, jobs where you were protecting others in some way. And also creative pursuits, artists and such. And here's what's interesting, if you read the data in the study, is there's actually no income level associated with job satisfaction. The study basically says that if you have your basic needs met, like you can eat and you have clothes and you have food, once you meet a minimum level of just basic needs, then the more money you make does not correlate to happiness or the feeling of contentedness or fullness. Now, here's another study. This one's interesting too. This one was done in the UK, and this one's interesting because they looked at 40 different studies around the world, and they compared the studies, and they basically came up with a conclusion like, is there this connection between selflessness and happiness? Is there a connection between serving and volunteering and just being full and happy and content? And basically they came up and said, hey, those people, around the world, so different people, different backgrounds all around, people who have a lifestyle of serving, not like, I served once in 2015, it was awesome, that was great. No, this is like people who have a consistent lifestyle of serving. The data said this, that volunteering, these people, and go to the next one, that volunteering, it actually decreases or it lowers, right? It lowers depression, it lowers heart disease, drug use, stress, and unplanned pregnancies. The study, the data, and then if you flip it on the positive side, they said, hey, people who volunteer, people who have a lifestyle of volunteering, people who are consistently being selfless, it's going to increase. Like they're going to improve or they're going to raise. They have a higher psychological well-being. Their physical health, they're just better physically. They have a higher self-esteem. They actually live longer. Like the studies show that people that volunteer and serve actually have more life. They have a longevity of life, and then the quality of life, just a better quality of life. It's people who serve and volunteer are just healthy. They're healthier mentally. They're healthier physically. They have a higher self-esteem. and they live longer and just have a better quality of life. One of the things I thought was the most fascinating, that one of the studies said that clinical research proves that volunteering and serving actually builds up your immune system. You can actually fight off disease by volunteering and serving. Now, I don't know what you're thinking right now, but my first thoughts when I'm reading all this is like, how can this be? Because this seems counterintuitive. It seems backward, because my natural inclination and your natural inclination is I'm going to try to acquire and consume and look good. Like if I can get certain things and consume certain things and look a certain way, then man, I'm good. I'm going to be set and happy, and people are like, look at that guy, he's amazing. But yet research after research from people all over the world asking different questions, different ways to different groups, comes to the same conclusion. And the conclusion basically says, hey, one of the best things you can do for you is to not focus on you. Like, Greg, one of the best things you can do for you, Greg, is to not focus on you. That actually selflessness leads to happiness. That selflessness leads to a better sense of well-being and ultimately to better health. In fact, I know some of you in this room got up early in the morning this morning. There's a whole group of volunteers here at Miami Church. You get up early. People like literally arrive here at like 7:30, 7:15 in the morning and come and serve. Right? And even right now as we're in here, there's people in those rooms back behind that wall with our kids, and they're like on the floor, crawling on the floor. Kids are slobbering all over them. They have stuff all over their shirt, right? And you serve and you give and you sacrifice, and what happens, right? In fact, I was just talking to a volunteer a minute ago that's been here since early this morning. He goes, I'm exhausted, right? And you're physically tired and you're physically exhausted, but what happens when you get home in the afternoon? There's this sense of like, wow, I'm full and I'm happy. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, like, how is this? Like, how can it be that actually doing stuff for other people, giving stuff away, doing something for someone other than me actually makes me happy? It makes me full. It makes me content. How is that? Like, most people don't get this, right? Because if they did, most people would be serving. But most people say things like this, like, yeah, that's cool. I just don't have time. Or, man, I'm busy. I can't do that. And you're like, whoa. But if you read the data, like if you look at the research, instead of saying you're busy, you'd be like, how can I not do this? Because it's actually going to improve the quality of your life. Like the best thing you can do for you is to quit doing stuff for you and do it for someone else. The best thing you can do for your family is to quit doing stuff for your family and do something for someone else's family. The research says that one of the best ways to get filled up is to pour yourself out. Why is this? I think and I believe that it comes down to two simple words. Divine design. Divine design. That this is how you were created. That all the research and all these data points and all this stuff you can find online, all it is revealing what you were designed by your Creator. This just reveals that who you are as humans, that you were created by the Creator to live with open hands. Right? Most people live life with closed hands. It's about me. What can I do? What can I consume? How can I look? But the belief here is that you were created to live with open hands. You were created, and we looked at this last week. If you were in part 2, we talked about this guy named Paul, who was a guy who was actually persecuting the church and trying to kill Christians. And he had this encounter with Jesus, and then he became this guy that helped start churches. And he wrote all these letters, and a lot of these letters became what we call the New Testament. And if you study his writings to these churches, all throughout there is what I call the one another list. Like over 50 times, he's like, hey, this is what you're to do to others. And this is just an example. There's over 50 of these. He's like, forgive one another, and accept one another, and care for one another, encourage one another, submit to one another, restore one another, carry one another's burdens, bear with one another. And over 50 times, he's basically saying, he says, you were designed by God. You were created to live open-handedly. You were created to one another. Like this is how you're supposed to live. But what happens? No one had to teach us how to be selfish, right? Like I have 3 kids. They're young kids. 8, 7, 4. Sounds right. 8, 7, 4, right? That live in my house. Not once have I ever sat down with like, all right, listen here, buddy. Here's the deal. These are your toys. This is your room. This is all your stuff. And if anybody comes through the door, you punch them. That's what you do, right? I never had to have that conversation. But they do that every single day, right? Right? There's this selfishness. No one had to teach us. We were born selfish, right? We were born. It's about me. Me. But selfishness comes naturally, but I would contend that selfishness was not part of your divine design. In fact, I would say it this way. Selfishness is the result of brokenness. Selfishness is the result of brokenness. In fact, Paul, this guy I was talking about a minute ago, this one another guy, he was one of these letters he's writing to a church, to followers of Jesus in a city called Galatia. And he wrote a letter. And in this letter, I'll show you what he wrote, Galatians 5:13. He's writing to the church. He says, for you, again, he's talking to you, for you have been called to live in freedom. He's like, listen, you've been called to this abundant life. You've been called to be free and to live full and content and have this huge sense of accomplishment and be happy. Like, that's my heart's desire. That's what you've been called to, brothers and sisters. But don't use your freedom to satisfy your sinful nature. That's the selfishness. That's me first. It's about me. He says, don't do that. Instead, and that's always a great word, instead, transition word. Rather than that, he says, do what? He says, use your freedom to serve, and he uses the phrase, one another in love. Serve what? He said, yeah, I know, I get it. Like your natural tendency and you just naturally, it's about you and what you want and your desires and me. But listen, there's a better way. There's a way, once you become a follower of Jesus and understand, there's a better way. Use your freedom to serve one another in love. Now, if we just stopped right here and just said, all right, done. And if you just took to heart what we said, and you did a little research on this and Googled whatever you want to Google, and you believed it and you activated it and just starting like stake in the ground, from this point forward, I'm going to start serving. I believe, and the data would support this, that your quality of life would just go up. Like you would be happier, you would have more joy, you would be more content, and maybe your health is a little better and your thoughts and mental and all that's a little better, and that would be great. But I think it's even bigger. I think it's even better. I think that's just the beginning. Because I believe God is calling you, wherever you are, whatever your background is, your experience, I believe God is calling you to serve. I believe God's calling you to live open-handedly, to live like this. When the world around you and everything around you is like this, I believe God's calling you to live like this. I believe God's calling you to a life of service. God is calling you to live in what I call an outward-focused life. And it's even bigger than that. Us, again, we've talked about in part one, church is not just a building or an hour on Sunday. It's people. It's a movement. I believe God's calling us to be an outward-focused church, to be an outward-focused people, to be an outward-focused movement. Let me just kind of illustrate how this works. So there's a guy in our church, and if he doesn't like me doing this, but that's fine. I have the microphone. He is kind of big, but that's cool. But there's a guy in our church. His name's Juan Marcos. And Juan Marcos shows up early. In fact, he was here this morning, 7:30. That's like 4.5 hours ago, right? He shows up early, and he comes in with just this attitude. He pulls his car in, and he just goes, what can I do? How can I help? And he doesn't wait for permission. He doesn't really even ask. He just shows up, and he just flips on it and looks around and goes, what needs to be done? And this morning, actually, I was here pretty early, 7:25. There was some palm fronds out in the parking lot. There was leaves everywhere. And so this dude, Juan Marcos, he shows up. He brings a blower from his house, right? He opens up his car, and he just starts blowing leaves all over the place and cleaning everything out. And then he comes upstairs, and he starts looking around. He's like, oh, there's a smudge on the glass in there. And he gets out the stone, and he's scrubbing the smudge. And he goes in the bathrooms. Are they clean? Like, what is this, everything? If someone needs to use the restroom, are they going to feel like this is a clean? And he starts doing all of this stuff. And what happens? Like, I believe, I've not ever asked him this, but I believe that it benefits him. I mean, he's a happy guy. He's full of joy. And I believe it gives him a sense of accomplishment. I believe it's probably good for his health. It's probably good for his mental well-being. His quality of life goes up. But you know what? It's even bigger than that. It's even better than that. Because a lot of Sunday mornings I show up. I get here usually about the same time. And I see him out there blowing leaves and picking up palm fronds. And I see him over there on his knees scrubbing the floor. And I go in the bathroom and see him in there scrubbing, right? And you know what? Sometimes I show up on a Sunday morning and I'm a little overwhelmed. It's been a crazy week. Sometimes I show up and like I mentioned earlier, I have 3 kids. And sometimes they all wake up on the wrong side of the bed on the same day. Right? And some Sunday mornings, they're all woke up on their left foot. And it's a disaster. I mean, they're all yelling and screaming and punching. And if I had hair, I would pull it out. But I don't have any hair. And I'm just sitting there like, get me out of here. This is horrible, right? And I come in here all frazzled because they've been yelling and screaming. And I'm like, oh, this is terrible. And some Sundays, you know what? I believe during the week, God gives me a word that I need to stand up here and share. But you know what? Sometimes I'm scared. Like, I don't know, that's gonna like ruffle some feathers there if I say that. And I don't know, that's going to make some people uncomfortable, and sometimes I'm feeling all of these things, right? And I come in and I come sit here early in the morning, and I come sit down and I look over and I see Juan Marcos, and I see him over there on his hands and knees scrubbing, or I see him up on the window, or I hear the blower outside. And it's like God saying, Greg, you know what? Get over yourself. It's not about you. Get over yourself. And some of you come rolling in here, 11:15, 11:20, 11:25, 11... I'm just kidding, right? But you come rolling in here, right? And we try like everything we can to just create an environment where you can encounter God. We try to remove distractions and barriers. If the place was dirty or unkept or whatever, it would just be a distraction. But little did you know, right? That some guy is out there at 7:30 in the morning blowing leaves so you could have a nice path and moving palm fronds out of parking spaces and scrubbing windows, right? So that you, when you come in here, you could have a good experience and you could experience an environment that's clean. And I can't, like, almost every week somebody says, man, this place just has energy. Like, well, I call that the presence of God. But yeah, we call that, there's just energy, right? And there's something about it because he's trying to create a space, an environment, right, that communicates to you that you can encounter God. So you know what that is? It's a domino effect, right? Little did you know there's a guy that just, because he wants to, no one's told him to, he doesn't have to, shows up early. And he creates a thing, and then it dominoes to me, and then it dominoes to you. And this is what serving and giving and volunteering does, is you don't ever know like 2 or 3 or 4 steps down, right? Somebody, some guy, some girl, somebody, right, is going to be impacted because of what you did. And you may not ever know their name, you may not ever talk to them, you may never have a conversation with them, but something that you're doing by you serving and giving, right, it doesn't just benefit you, and it doesn't even just benefit the next guy, but it dominoes down, and it has this domino effect. See, it's bigger. It's even better. And this begins to get to the heart of who we are. This begins to the heart of our church and what we're about. This begins to get to the foundation. See, we started this thing, which is a really small handful of people a couple years back, right? And from day one, we said, you know what? We just want to create a church in this part of the city that just loves people. We just want to create a church because we believe there's this good God, this loving God who wants to be in a relationship with you and is pursuing you and has this relentless pursuit of you. And we want you to know Him. We want you to find this relationship. And once you do, we want you to follow Him. Because we believe that Jesus, a relationship with Jesus, will make your life better and make you better at life. It's not just about eternity, right, with God. It's now, it's here and now that your life will be better and you will be better at life with a real and genuine relationship with Jesus. And there's this story in Acts chapter 15 that really serves as a point of inspiration. It serves as a motivation. It serves as a touch point for this heart of who we're trying to be and who we're trying to become. And in Acts 15, I don't have time to read the entire passage to you, so I'll try to kind of sum up the story and you can read it later. In fact, you can take one of those Bibles. We have a Steal a Bible program, so you can steal those and you won't get arrested. Steal anything else and I'll come chase you. But you can take the Bible, all right? But here's this thing, right? In Acts 15, what's happening is that the early followers, right? The early followers of Jesus were Jewish. And so they had Jewish scriptures and they were Jewish people. And the logic was, right, in order to follow Jesus, you had to first convert to Judaism. You had to be Jewish, and then once you're Jewish, then you could be a follower of Jesus. That was the logic. Now, for most of us in the room, that doesn't mean a lot. If you have a Jewish background, maybe you understand a little bit more. Now, that's complicated Because at the time in the first century, there were actually over 660 rules. So to be a Jewish, you had to follow 600. I couldn't even, how would you even know that? It'd be like a thick book of all these rules, like eat this, do that, walk on this foot, chew gum on this side, like all of these rules, right? And not only that, there was all these requirements. You had to do the temple and all these other things. And so this kind of came to a head. This whole conflict came to a head. It came to a pinnacle about 20 years after the resurrection of Jesus. So Jesus, these guys had quit on Jesus, and they saw him alive, and then they start helping plant all these churches. And 20 years, they have this meeting, and they get together, and there's two sides to this, right? And so over here on this side is the camp, like, nope, you got to be Jewish. In order to follow Jesus, you got to first convert to Judaism and be a Jew. And I'm doing it. I'm holding all 660. You can do it. It's not that hard. Yeah. And then on this other side where people are like, no. I hear you, yes, but this is a new thing. When Jesus came and died and rose from the dead, it's new. It's not a continuation. It's not part 2. This is a new thing. This is a new book. This is a new thing. And so they're having this meeting, and it's back and forth. It's kind of like a tennis match, and they're going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And so a couple of guys, you can read it in Acts 15. First guy stands up, Peter, who obviously is well-known, follower of Jesus. And he says, all right, listen, I get it, guys. I grew up Jewish, but I had this experience with this guy named Cornelius. This is new. This is new. And then Paul, who I was just talking about earlier, who did the one another list and wrote all these letters, then he stands up. He says, listen, guys, I get it. I was like the Jew of all Jews. I did all the rules times 10. I'm like the guy. But listen, I've been traveling the whole world, and I've been meeting a lot of non-Jewish people, Gentile people, and they're encountering God. They're having legitimate, authentic encounters with God. And man, you just don't have to convert to Judaism first. And so they're having this conversation. It's back and forth, and then there's this moment. And I wish I could be there to see this moment. But there's this moment where James, the brother of Jesus, stands up. Now, James had gone from not believing, right? Like, no way that my brother is the Messiah, the Son of God. Like, would you believe your brother's the Son? No, exactly. So he's like, no way, right? And they crucified Jesus, and James is like, yeah, you got what was coming to you, man. He's spewing all this crazy stuff out there. But then James saw Jesus alive. After the resurrection, he saw him. He was an eyewitness. He saw Jesus, and everything changed. And he said, no, I believe that my brother is who he says he is. I believe my brother's the Messiah, the Son of God. And James said, my brother Jesus is my Savior. I'm going to follow him. And so James actually becomes a leader in the first church. And he goes on, he was one of the first people to be killed because of his belief in Jesus. So James becomes this leader, and he had this nickname as James the Just. I mean, he was really respected. And so they're having this meeting, and finally James, in fact, you can see it here. It's in Acts 15:13. It'll be on the screen. It says, when they had finished, right? So they're having this back and forth. And finally, it says, when they'd finished, James spoke up. You get to see it like, James. He says, brothers, listen to me. I bet it was quiet, kind of like this. And there's this moment. James says, verse 19, it is my judgment, therefore, that we should not make it difficult for the Gentiles who are turning to God. Translation. Anything that is an unnecessary obstacle, anything that is an impediment, anything that is an unnecessary barrier that keeps Gentiles, non-Jewish people from giving their lives to Jesus, we have to get rid of it. We have to eliminate it. And here at Miami Church, this has been a point of inspiration, a point of motivation. In fact, we've taken the words of James to heart. And we're trying as best as we can to remove any unnecessary obstacles, any extra added to steps, any barriers that would keep people who are turning from God or exploring God or curious about God, that there should be nothing. There should be nothing that would be a barrier or an obstacle or an impediment, except the one thing that will always be and must always be an obstacle, and that is the question, who is Jesus? Because at some point, you've got to wrestle that question to the ground on your own. In fact, we did an entire series on this earlier this year called Starting Point, around the simple question, who is Jesus? That's an obstacle. That's a question that all of us at some point will have to answer. Who is Jesus? But in the meantime, we, as Miami Church, as a group of people, we should do everything we can to make it easy for anyone who's asking that question, who is Jesus? That we should remove any barriers or obstacles or unnecessary barriers. And here's the tie-in. Here's how this all ties in, right? Our posture, right? Our posture, our attitude, is that of open hands, right? Everyone is welcome. How can we serve? What can we do, right? Kind of the Juan Marcos mentality, like, what needs to be done? How can we help? And this shows up in how we try to do things, right? You came in this morning, and there were people out in the parking lot, standing under the tent. Hopefully you were greeted, and people were genuinely concerned about you and said, hey, welcome, I'm glad you're here. It shows up in our facility, in our building. Again, this is a building. It's not the church. Church is people. Right? But we work hard. Is it clean? Does it feel? Does it create an environment where you can receive and encounter what God is trying to say to you? It shows up in our kids' space, back there behind that wall where people are on the floor, loving kids, trying to demonstrate and show and tell kids about the love of Jesus in a fun and safe environment. This shows up in why people would show up here 4.5 going on 5 hours ago, right? To show up here to this space on a Sunday morning as a volunteer, not getting paid, not getting anything, they don't even want to do breakfast, right? You get nothing. Why would people do that? Why would people bring a blower and blow leaves or move palm fronds? Why? Because God is calling us to be an outward-focused church, and God is calling you to be an outward-focused follower. And this is our divine design. This is not natural. Our natural inclination is selfishness, but this is our divine design. This is our calling. This is our mission. One of the things about being a pastor, probably one of my least favorite things about being a pastor, the weddings are okay, but the funerals are terrible. Right? I've done a lot of funerals, been to a lot of funerals. And one of the things every single funeral confirms, 100%, every single one, the value of a life. How do you measure the value of life? You see it on the screen. The value of a life at every single funeral I've ever been to is measured by how much of it was given away. How much of it was given away. Your life will one day be measured. My life will one day be measured. How much was given away? Our life, our church, when someday, years from now, 50 years from now, when someone's reflecting back on this group of people that called themselves Miami Church, how was that church? What was that church about? The measure of it will be how much did we give away? And this is for you. Your calling is to live open-handedly, to serve. And yes, it has benefits for you. I believe it has psychological and physical and mental, and you'll live longer. Yeah, I believe that. And I will too. But it's bigger than that. It's for us. We have been called to be a people together collectively that lives with open hands, that serves our city, that goes above and beyond. When everybody else is living like this, we're going to live like this. For our city. Can we, as it says in Acts 17, it says they turned the world upside down. The first church. You know how they did that? They lived like this. Could we see this city impacted for the sake of Jesus?
Thanks so much for tuning in today. We hope that it brought you encouragement and brought you hope for the rest of the day. If you have any questions or like to talk to someone, you can email us at hello@miamichurch.com. If you'd also like to support what we're doing here, you can go to miamichurch.churchcenter.com/giving. Make sure to subscribe. We love you. Thanks for watching.